Welcome everyone to the April webinar of IPRA, the International Pension Research Association. My name is Hazel Bateman and I'm the president of the association. We're running this seminar tonight. Well, I'm based in Australia, and in Australia we recognise the traditional owners of the land before we begin a meeting. So before we begin proceedings, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of country throughout Australia and their continuing connection to land, waters and culture. I pay my respects to the elders past and present and extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders who are present here today. Okay, so I welcome you to our webinar, and our speaker today is Marike Knoef. I'm very pleased to have Marike. Marike is a professor at Leiden University and Tilburg University, and she's also director of Netspar, the Network for Studies on Pensions, Ageing and Retirement in the Netherlands. Marike tonight is going to talk to us, or tonight, this morning, this afternoon, or this evening, depending where you are. He's going to talk to us about the demand for retirement products, the role of withdrawal flexibility and administrative burden function. So I'm now going to pass over to Marike.
Thank you very much, Hazel. It's very nice to be here. So thank you very much for the invitation. I see some familiar names in the screen, so that's very nice, and also some new names. So the paper I will present is about the demand for retirement products and the role of withdrawal flexibility and administrative burden. And this is joint work with Pim Koopmans and Max van Lent, also from Leiden University and Netspar. So now here we see a couple, and the quote is, I finally put something aside for my retirement. I put aside my plans to retire. So it appears that this couple didn't save enough for their retirement, and therefore they have to work longer. And that happens to people in the Netherlands. We see that about 30% of the employees are not saving enough. And for the self-employed, this is even larger. So there we see about 40% of the people who do not save enough for their retirement. And that is also internationally, also when looking at other countries, we see that the self-employed, they are a very vulnerable group. So why do these people not save enough for their retirement? So there are several factors like the present bias, administrative burden. Maybe people have a too low financial literacy. Maybe they have regret aversion. They want to make choices about their pensions, but then it's a hurdle for them to make choices, and in the end, they don't make any choice. And also loss aversion can play a role. People like the money that they have today, and if they have to put it in a pension product, then it feels like a loss of today's money. Now, finally, on the left, we also see the illiquidity of pension products, and that may especially hold for the self-employed. So when I'm self-employed, I often have a more income that is fluctuating over time, so a volatile income. And then it may be a hurdle to put money in these pension products, because maybe next year there's a crisis and I have a very low income, and then I need this money to make ends meet. And when it's then illiquid in a pension product, I cannot use it. So that can be a hurdle, especially for the self-employed. And that leads to now this research question. So can withdrawal flexibility and a lower administrative burden increase the demand for retirement products? And the contribution of this paper to the literature is that this is the first paper, as far as we know, that studies the willingness to pay of different types of withdrawal options. So there is already some research about these withdrawals. We have Beshears et al. 2020. They are studying penalized withdrawals. So what happens if people have to pay like 10% penalty or a 20% penalty when they withdraw money from their pension fund. But in addition to that, we are also going to study what is the willingness to pay for withdrawal options with regard to income? And so maybe if your income is below the minimum wage, then you are allowed to withdraw money such that you can top it up to the minimum wage and you can spend the minimum wage. Or maybe we have a withdrawal option for education and investment purposes. And especially for the self-employed, this can be interesting because they are for themselves responsible for their education and investments. And finally, maybe we investigate the option to withdraw money from the pension account for mortgage down payments. So often you see that on the one hand, people have now their pension account, and on the other hand, they also have a high mortgage. And in that case, now these people are more vulnerable for changes in the interest rate, for crisis on the housing market. So then it can be interesting to use this money in the pension account for mortgage down payments. Now, I'm also interested to make you think about these kind of options. I made a small, let's see whether it works. A small Mentimeter, then it's over here, yes. So to make you think about these withdrawal options, I ask you the question, which withdrawal option would you choose? Would you be present biased and you know you are aware of yourself that you are present biased? Now maybe then you choose no withdrawal option. Or maybe you think, okay, I need some flexibility maybe, and therefore I choose a penalized withdrawal. Or I want to have a withdrawal option when I have a low income, or for education and investments, or for this mortgage down payments. Now, if you have the opportunity, I'm not sure whether you are lunching at this moment or doing something else, but if you have the opportunity, you can go to menti.com and use the code 3788-8841. And let's see what's coming out. And otherwise, I put it aside, and maybe I can say see later on in the webinar whether people had the opportunity to vote. Okay, so for now I'm going back to the presentation. So what is our contribution? First, that we are studying these different types, but also that we are investigating the self-employed. Because now when you are using a representative sample, then the self-employed is a relatively small group. But to be able to make a good comparison, we say we have a sample that is about half of them are self-employed and the other half are employees, so that we can make a good comparison, and that we can also investigate the role of income volatility, because the self-employed have very often a more volatile income, and therefore now this can be a reason for them to have a higher willingness to pay of these withdrawal options. Now, in earlier research, like Beshears et al. 2020, they have an online experiment, and they investigate different levels of penalties. When you withdraw money from the pension account, you need to pay like 10%, 20%, or no withdrawal.
Excuse me, Marike. Sorry. Yes? Could we just go back to the question you asked us all to do?
Yes.
We were wondering if you could put the website and code in the chat, because we were unable to answer the questions.
Of course. Yes. Let's see. Go to the chat. So it's Menti. It's very good that you tell about this. So menti.com is the website, and the code is 3788, and then 8841. So 3788-8841.
Thank you.
I hope this helps. That's a good idea, because now people can answer, and meanwhile, oh, I see already some answers, yes. So education and investment purposes are there are people who would like to withdraw money for that purpose. But probably there's also someone in the audience who says, oh, I'm present biased and I'm aware of this myself. It's called sophisticated present bias. And I choose the option not to have any opportunity to withdraw. And we also see for negative income shocks, there's interest, and for market payments. So thank you very much for these answers. And now later on, I can have a look again. So now we have 7 answers, and we see that now most of you are interested in withdrawal options for income shocks, for mortgage down payments, and for education and investment opportunities. And there are also some people who like the penalized withdrawal. So then you can use it for everything. That's the good thing. But there is this penalty to make you really think about whether it's a good idea. Yes, so thank you very much. And here we see the result of Beshears et al. In their online experiment. And they find that a higher withdrawal penalty attracts more commitment account deposits. So people are more, find this higher penalties more attractive, which is from a rational viewpoint a bit typical. You wouldn't expect it because higher penalties rationally you wouldn't like that. But because now part of the people being sophisticated present biased, they know that there is this possibility that they withdraw this money to go on holiday, and to prevent that, they like the higher penalties. Now, in addition to this research, we also investigate several types of other types of withdrawal purposes. Now, there's a trade-off over here, and maybe you also realized this when you were making your choice in the Mentimeter. Because on the one hand, these withdrawal options enable you to flexibly respond to events, like an income shock that raises the marginal utility of consumption, and you would like to take a withdrawal from the pension account. But on the other hand, if it's very easy to withdraw from the pension account, then this can also lead to undersaving, especially when you make now planning mistakes, when you are present biased, then maybe you take out the money too soon just for a holiday or something else. And then in the end, you are retired and you have too little, not enough money anymore. So it depends on how you deal with this trade-off, whether people are sophisticated or naive. So are people aware of their own present bias or not? And when people are aware of their present bias, then you have this example on the left where people freeze their credit cards. You cannot see the numbers anymore. And before you can make a payment, you have to wait until it's defrosted. And then you have time to think about, do I really need to buy this product or not? And that can help you to overcome this present bias. So people are then committing themselves. And there's also research about this, about commitment saving accounts, and that are saving accounts, and you cannot withdraw money until a certain date or until a certain goal amount is reached. And now in this study of Ashraf et al., they find that 28% of the households are choosing for a commitment account. So they are themselves committing themselves to save this money. So people, it's not a rational thing, but because of being aware of these behavioral problems, people choose for these commitment accounts. You also see it today with these mobile phones, that there are apps that you can download. For example, when you want to go to Facebook or to Twitter or anything, that first you have to shake like 10 times, or you have to make a round to walk around before you can enter the app. That's also because people know themselves, I'm putting too much time in this app, and therefore I commit myself in a certain way to reduce this. So to increase savings or reduce the time spent on this app. Now, as a government or as a policymaker, you can think about whether people are sophisticated or not. And whether people are not sophisticated, they are naive. It means they are present biased and they are themselves not enough aware of that, or too late. Then you could say, now maybe we can make the DC plan illiquid. And here we see a study from Beshears et al. 2015, who have investigated the liquidity of DC plans in different countries. And they find that, for example, in Germany and the UK, these plans are very illiquid. They are somewhat more liquid in Singapore, in Canada and Australia, and in the US. So what they find, like in Germany and the UK, you cannot withdraw any money. Only when you are disabled or terminally ill, you may receive some payments from the account. In Singapore, this is quite similar. However, participants can access part of their balance at the age of 55. And there's also a paper that's Agarwal et al. 2020. They investigate what happens when people withdraw part of their money at the age of 55. And they see that especially the low income people, the low liquidity people, that they now change their consumption pattern. So they are going to spend a little bit more. And for the people who have a higher liquidity, now they do not change their spending behavior. And now this amount that they withdraw from the pension account is just on their bank account over there. In Canada and Australia, we have, now they find that there's some liquidity in the event of adverse transitory labor income shocks, or long unemployment or underemployment. So then you can withdraw some money from the pension account. And in the US, there appears to be a high degree of liquidity. You have maximum tax penalties of 10%. And early withdrawals are even slightly subsidized as income falls. You have a negative income shock, for example. But then you also see there's quite a lot of leakage. So for every $1 contributed to DC accounts, savers under the age of 55, now about 40 dollar cents are flowing out of the system. So on the one hand, there's now more flexibility, but it also may lead to a shortage of retirement savings. Now, the Netherlands is on the left. It was not in this study, but I put it over there because actually it's not so easy it's impossible to withdraw money from the pension accounts. Only for some with high penalties sometimes in some schemes, and in some schemes also with disability. Now, the administrative burden is also quite high. So in the Netherlands, we have tax-facilitated pension products, but they are only known by 50% of the population. That is what we found in this study. So it's not very commonly used, and it's commonly known by the people. And when they want to use this tax-facilitated pension products, now in some schemes, you need to report income over the past 3 years. And in other schemes, you need to compute now a tax deductibility threshold, which is not so easy for people. And this can also be a hurdle. It is also found in the literature. So we have, for example, a paper of Duflo and others in 2006, and they investigate matching contribution rates. Like when as an employee I contribute to the pension scheme, then there's also the employer or the government who matches the contributions. And you see in this study that this increases the willingness of low and middle income families to contribute to these pension schemes, but mainly if presented now very simple and very salient, because if it's more difficult, then it doesn't seem to work. So now a low administrative burden seems to be important in that. So that brings me to the method of this research. So we investigate this administrative burden, but also this withdrawal options, this options to withdraw money from the pension account. And therefore we use a stated choice experiment. So we are looking at trade-offs in terms of benefit levels, this withdrawal flexibility and the administrative burden. And therefore, now we elicit choice probabilities. We ask people, we give them the choice between two hypothetical products, and we ask them, what is the probability that you will choose product A instead of product B, or the other way around? Now, you can also think about situations where people say, now A and B, I don't want to choose between A and B because I don't want to have any of these two products. And therefore, we also include vignettes where we give people the choice between a product, a hypothetical product, and no product, so that we can also see the interest in now any product at all. And in this method, now we follow the median regression approach, which is also used by Blas, Lach, and Mansky in 2010. So now maybe going to this one, this is an example of a question that people see. So we have product A and we have product B with different amount of benefits, different amount of administrative burden, and different amount of flexibility. And these are the levels that we use in these questions. So with regard to the withdrawal flexibility, we have 5 levels. So either you have no early withdrawal, or you have a 20% penalty when you withdraw money. It's just available to supplement income up to the minimum wage when you appear to have an income lower than the minimum wage. It can be that you have now a maximum of 15,000 euros every 5 years that you can take out for investments, or the situation where you can use the money for mortgage payments. And it's also a maximum of 15,000 for every 5 years. And then with regard to the administrative burden, we have 3 levels. So either you have, there's no obligation to provide any information, or you have to compute now a maximum annual contribution that you can make depending on the fiscal rules, or you have to provide 3-year income history. And finally, of course, the level of the annuity, which is important. Now, in these type of questions, like these vignettes where we ask people to make choices between 2 hypothetical products with different characteristics, that is what we ask to a representative sample of self-employed people and employees. And we choose to only look at those people who are working 28 hours per week or longer. And that is because they have a substantial attachment to the labor market. And for them, it's also essential to make now enough retirement savings, in addition to the public pension scheme, which is there for everyone. Then we have the self-employed that are 822 persons and 911 employees. Now these 16 vignettes, and we ask people about now socio-demographic variables and several preferences. So I can show you a bit what is this sample about. Now here we see like age, the amount of females, homeowners, working hours, education level, and actually what is most interesting here is the amount of females. So we found that among this group of self-employed, 50% is female, and among the group of employees, this is 26%. So this was a bit surprising for me, and therefore we looked a bit at other statistics, like is this correct, or do we have now is something wrong? Then we found that this is similar to national statistics and other questionnaires. So now apparently, when we are looking at the self-employed with now more than 28 working hours per week, then these are more females, relatively more females compared to men, when we compare this to the employees. Yes, so that is the sample. We also ask a risk aversion about for these people. So we use the Eckel and Grossman questionnaire, and we find that what is interesting, I think, is that the risk aversion, according to this simple measure, is very similar for the self-employed and the employees. So sometimes it is mentioned that the self-employed, now they have lower retirement savings, and maybe this is because risk aversion is higher of the self-employed compared to the employees. That is sometimes mentioned, but according to this measurement, now we see that risk aversion is not very different between self-employed and employees, and cannot explain the lower retirement savings of the self-employed. Here we also see some measurements of present bias. Now it's also very similar for self-employed and the employees. The long-term discount factor, which is very similar. Now probabilities, the life expectancy, which if people have a different expectation, this may also influence retirement savings, but we see that they are very similar between the self-employed and the employees. Here we see the amount spent, and that is a measure where we measure the bequest motive of people. So we ask people about, now when you imagine the situation when you are 80 and you have only 1 year to live. Now what is, and you have an income of 3,000 euros per month. And how much of this money do you want to spend yourself? And how many of this money do you want to leave for kids or other people as a bequest? And we also see that this is quite similar for, on average, for the self-employed and the employees. And the same question when we ask this for an income of 9,000 euros per month. And then we see that people want to spend somewhat more than 5,000 euros per month themselves, and the rest of the money is a bequest. Then finally, now perceived financial literacy is quite similar, and we also have some objective financial literacy, some multiple choice questions about financial topics to see how financial literate these people are. Now we see some differences between the self-employed and the employees, but they are not very substantial. So actually you can say that the self-employed and the employees are quite similar with regard to these socio-demographic characteristics, with regard to preferences, life expectancy, literacy, bequest motives. However, what is very different is income fluctuations. So the timing of this questionnaire was at the beginning of COVID-19. And we asked people, do you anticipate income fluctuations due to COVID-19? And we see indeed that now those who strongly agree that are more often the self-employed compared to the employees. So now the self-employed have a more volatile income, which is also as expected, of course. Now then we know the answers to these hypothetical these choices that people made between these products, these pension products, and we can then estimate the willingness to pay. So here we see just the estimation results of the model, and then it's somewhat more difficult to interpret these coefficients. So I show you the willingness to pay estimates. And how can we interpret these? Now, for example, let's say over here we have the withdraw for a mortgage, so the option to withdraw money for a mortgage. Then we see that especially the self-employed, that are the blue lines, especially the self-employed are very interested in this. And they have a willingness to pay, which is quite high. It's almost now 15% of the annuity that they are willing to pay in order to have the option to withdraw money for the mortgage. Now we also see that these self-employed, they have now significantly positive willingness to pay to withdraw money for investments in education or other investments, and also to withdraw money to compensate a low income. And this is also for the employees. This is interesting. They are also interested in these mortgages, in a compensation when they have a low income. But the willingness to pay for that is lower among the employees, probably because they have a more stable income. On top, we have the administrative burden. So the reference category is that you have now no administrative burden. You don't have to look up income histories and so on. And here we see that compared to this situation where you don't have to give all kind of information, you see that needing to provide all these income histories and other types of information, that decreases the willingness to pay for this pension product. And it's also substantial. It's about now almost, it's like 8 percentage points. So 8% of the annuity people are willing to pay in order to not have this administrative burden. And here we also see, especially the self-employed are willing to pay for this. So these are the basic results of the analysis for now the self-employed and the employees. And now I have also finally some results, some heterogeneous results to better understand what is driving these preferences. And here we see, for example, the results when we split the sample between those people who expect to have a volatile income and those people who don't expect a volatile income, so more a stable income. And we see that the willingness to pay is higher for those people who who have a volatile income, and they are more likely have a higher willingness to pay to have the option to withdraw money, for example, in a low income situation. And I also have results with regard to liquidity. So those who have a large amount on their saving accounts, for example, here we use a threshold of 20,000 euros, and you have more than 20,000 euros on your saving account, then these people have a somewhat lower willingness to pay for these withdrawal options compared to the full sample. So it's especially those with now low liquidity who are more interested in these withdrawal options, which is also what you would expect. So that would say now it's good to have some withdrawal options, and now people are have a positive willingness to pay. So that is we should introduce these kind of withdrawal options. However, of course, we are a bit worried about present bias, that people are choosing for these withdrawal options, and in the end, they have too little savings for their retirement. Now, that's indeed, that is something to worry about, because here we see results with regard to the present bias. And on the right, we have the people, the results for the selection of people who are more present biased. They have a present bias parameter smaller than 0.9. So this means these people have a higher level of present bias. And we see that especially they are interested in these withdrawal options. So they have a relatively high willingness to pay for withdrawal options in case of a low income, for investments, and for mortgages. So that is something to worry about, because yeah, if they are not aware of this, then now it's also a worry whether they then save not too little. And the next step in the analysis, I had to think about this when I was making these slides, is that we have also a variable where we ask people whether they are aware of procrastinating retirement savings. And then we can distinguish these sophisticated present bias people compared to the naive people who are not so much aware of this procrastination. And let's see now what's coming out of that also. Now that brings me to the conclusion. So the main conclusion is that withdrawal flexibility and administrative burden are important, especially for the self-employed. So they have the self-employed, they have 8% willingness to pay, 8% of the annuity they are willing to pay to reduce this administrative burden. We also find the employees, they prefer no withdrawal option above the withdrawal with a penalty. That is in line with Beshears et al. 2020. We also find that these employees, they are sophisticated present biased, and they prefer to have no withdrawal option compared to an option where they have they can withdraw money with a penalty. Now, both self-employed and employees like the idea that they can take out money for mortgage-related and income-related situations. But for the self-employed, these options are much more valuable. They have a larger willingness to pay. So it seems interesting. So at the moment, at least in the Dutch legislation, and I think also in other countries, there are not so much withdrawal options, and it would be interesting to introduce these withdrawal options in case of a low income, for mortgage reasons, for investment reasons, for the self-employed. However, we have to be aware that there are part of the people now naive, present biased, and then the conditions are very important to be sure that these people are not saving too little in the end because of having these withdrawals from their pension account. And that brings me to the end of the presentation.